A Hawke's Bay woman has been sentenced to 11 months home detention for the manslaughter of her husband 6 years ago. Now, this was a death the coroner had initially ruled involved no foul play. Susan Mowat, who has 18 previous convictions, including some for violence or threats of violence, appeared in the High Court in New Plymouth today for sentencing. Our Taranaki reporter, Robin Martin, was in court.
Problem drinkers, Bruce and Susan Mowat had endured a tempestuous relationship for about 10 years before his death in 2011. Mr Mowat got a protection order against his partner in 2006, but despite this, the couple, who had 2 children, married in 2009. In July 2011, Bruce Mowat had been drinking heavily at a work function in Hawke and was dropped off home by colleagues at about 1 a.m. Justice Churchman told the court the couple then got into an argument.
Mr Mowat went to the front door, having picked up the car keys, which you then grabbed back off him. Mr Mowat attempted to push his way back into the house, but you pushed him in response, and as a result, he fell backwards off the porch, striking his head.
Mr Mowat, a former president of the Taranaki Alpine Club, died in Wellington Hospital 10 days later. In 2 police statements taken in 2011, Susan Mowat said her husband fell unassisted, and a 2012 coronial hearing ruled it was an accidental death. In August last year, she again denied any involvement, but in October admitted to pushing Mr Mowat. Her defence lawyer, Russell Fairbrother, told the court she had never intended to hurt her husband.
Harm to her husband that night was not intended. The action of pushing him away so she could close the door so the household would remain peaceful and her daughter would continue sleeping was meant just as an action to free herself from a form of behaviour which she found as a breach of trust.
Mr Fairbrother says Susan Mowat's eventual admission showed 2 things.
One, it shows that the defendant has not been able to deny what happened. It has worried her continually. But 2, it is acceptance of her role in this death, and she has taken ownership of that, and she is prepared to accept the consequences.
Mr Fairbrother wanted a sentence of supervision and community work, but prosecutor Justin Marinovich said while the Crown accepted Susan Mowat had not intended to kill her husband, the seriousness of the charge and the impact on his family had to be reflected in the sentence. He sought a sentence of 12 months home detention. In sentencing, Justice Churchman said the defendant's previous convictions and problems with alcohol were a concern.
17 of those convictions were acquired during the period of your relationship with the deceased. These convictions include a number relating to various forms of assault or threats. The PAC report identifies a connection between alcohol abuse and violence on your part.
Justice Churchman ordered that Susan Mowat complete a rehabilitation program as part of her sentence and be subject to a supervision order for a year after the end of her home detention. Outside court, Mr Mowat's brother-in-law, Simon Harrison, said the family were disappointed with the sentence.
So clearly we knew that the sentence wasn't going to bring Bruce back after 6 long years, and the family respects the parameters within which the justice has to sentence, but I think it's fair to say that the family are a bit disappointed with the sentence, but well, as I say, no sentence was ever going to bring Bruce back.
Mr Harrison said although the sentencing brought some kind of closure, the family was still struggling to cope with their loss. In New Plymouth for Checkpoint, call Robin Martin Tierney.